workshop with Mike Connor. My name is Clementine Zvetanov, and with my husband Krasimir Zvetanov, we are organizer for Insight seminar in Cyprus. Insight is a worldwide organization that provides educational programs to inspire individuals and companies. And the way it's done is by increasing their awareness, their loving, and also self-accountability. So tonight, I'd like to welcome Mike Connor with me. So Mike has designed and delivered programs and seminars on 5 different continents over the past 20 years as the lead facilitator for Insight seminars and principal consultant for Bridge. And besides working with executives from some of the world's largest companies, Mike is also a former president and CEO of the Insight Education Institute, adjunct professor at Tufts University prestigious Gordon Institute, and author and co-author of 5 books. And Mike's topic for today's conversation will be the antidote to the other virus and how to replace fear by love. And Mike will be focusing tonight on how we can stay resourceful, calm, and responsible during this challenging time of disruption and uncertainty. So thank you, Mike, for being with us tonight. Welcome.
Thank you, Clementine. And I really appreciate the invitation to speak with you and also your viewers on this really important topic during this very important period of time. And I'd like to take a moment to just any of you viewers that are watching this. I just want to say thank you for joining us. And it's really my privilege to not only have this dialogue with you, Clementine, but also hopefully share some things over the course of the next hour that the viewers will find valuable.
Thank you, Mike. So you clearly have a lot of experience and an impressive background. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our listener about yourself tonight?
Yeah, I'd like to share a couple of things. One is, while the resume looks impressive, and I have done a lot, I'm also a human being going through this very challenging and unprecedented time in history, really. None of us has really ever been through anything like what we're experiencing these last couple of weeks, this past month, and not really knowing what's ahead. You know, I'm a father. I have a 20-year-old and an 18-year-old that are both home from school right now with us. My wife is a physician, a doctor, and so she's very much on the front lines. And so I'll be speaking, obviously, a little bit later as we go through this about how do we shift what we're calling the antidote to the other virus. And we're saying that the other virus is the virus of fear. And we're looking at how do we shift from fear to love. And that's what we'll be looking at here. But I do want to really say that, you know, I'm a human being. And so I have my moments of fear. I have how every day I'm kind of managing my process. So I want to make sure that as we have this conversation, that it's one that acknowledges that I don't think there's any experts out there in terms of dealing with what we're dealing with right now. Just a lot of human beings, and hopefully a message of how can we each kind of deal with this most effectively, most resourcefully, and in a way that can help us and the people around us deal with this. I think the one other thing I wanted to share, Clementine, before we dive in is I know that the people watching this are going to want some resources to help them through this journey. And you had mentioned Insight seminars. So Insight seminars, as you and your husband are overseeing in Cyprus. And by the way, I know that you have a newsletter that you're going to be mentioning at the end of our call, which will be a great resource for people. So I think the first thing I would call out is if they can get on your mailing list, that would be a really wonderful resource to help them navigate this period of time. Insightseminars.org is the global website for Insight. And Insight, as you mentioned earlier, Clementine, is filled with processes and approaches that help us to connect to our deepest sense of purpose. And I feel like during these times, it's so helpful to get perspective by connecting and understanding ourselves and how we can come at this and through this from a place of purpose. So, and let me also share, if I would, about, you mentioned that I'm a principal consultant for a company called Bridge. And I would also offer a couple of other resources, because with Bridge, I work with some of the biggest companies in the world, top CEOs, top teams. And if anybody's listening in who is running a company or is working through this from a corporate standpoint, the website for Bridge is bridge-partnership.com, bridge-partnership.com. We also have a not-for-profit arm in Bridge called the Bridge Institute. And this is where we address some of the world's biggest and most challenging problems. And it'll be interesting as we really take some of our methodologies and approaches and focus it on what we're dealing with right now with COVID-19. And if you're interested in hearing more about the Bridge Institute, that would be bridge-institute.org. So I just wanted to give some of those websites as resources for the people that are on the call to help them individually or from a company perspective or from a global perspective.
Thank you, Mike. So let me ask you another question. But before I do so, I like to invite our listeners to ask questions tonight. So you have the possibility to write in the chat box any question you have for Mike. You can also say hi, and it would be great to know also from which country you are. Like I just saw that there is hi from Bulgaria, so thank you very much to be here with us tonight. So if you can say also some question that's coming to you during this conversation, that would be great. So Mike, those are clearly challenging time for everyone, and nobody seems to know what's going to happen afterwards. Even the world's leaders doesn't know what the future holds. So how can we stay positive and live without fear in these times?
It's really a great question, Clementine. And I think one of the things that to ask ourselves is, where do we pay attention to fear and where do we not let fear run us? And I'd like to speak a little bit about how we can be more resourceful as we go through this period of uncertainty. And how do we identify and be safe and smart so we listen to our fear and how to use that, but how not to have our fear run us so that we make poor decisions and maybe aren't as aware as we could be. And let me speak about it from a couple of different lenses, but I want to speak, if I could start, talking about what happens in our brain when something happens outside of us that we perceive as a threat of some kind. It could be anything. In this case, there's a lot of things happening with COVID-19 and with the virus. We might get news about someone else who is sick, or we might get news about the economy, or that we're afraid we're going to lose our company, or we're afraid for the health. I mentioned that my wife is a physician, is a doctor. You know, there's a lot of things happening around us right now. And then what the thing that we want to look at is what happens. We get news, maybe we see something in the news or we talk to somebody, but then what happens inside of us? What do we do with that? And when anything happens outside of us that some part of us determines is a threat, it might be a threat to our physical health. It might be a threat to our financial security. It might be a threat to our identity. What we do when that happens is we do something inside of us. And what happens is what's called the amygdala hijack. The amygdala is the part of the brain that's its main function is survival. And so when we have something that comes in from the outside that we interpret as some kind of a threat, we activate the amygdala. Now, there's nothing wrong with the fact that the amygdala gets activated. The problem is that the amygdala, if you think of survival, you think of what we tend to do when we go to a place of survival. We tend to think of, you know, fight, flight, or freeze, right? The kind of classic three responses to survival. Now, and then what we do is we go into a mode almost as if we're being chased by a lion in the forest, because the amygdala is a very old part of our brain. It goes back to a very old part of us that relates to real physical survival. The problem is when the amygdala, what we call the amygdala hijack, is it hijacks our thinking, and we no longer have access to our neocortex. We no longer have access to the smarter, more evolved part of our brain. And what happens then is we're making decisions without knowing it, coming from a part of us that's less resourceful, that's more based on this fight, flight, or freeze place. And I think every one of us can have stories about this. We can notice when we want to just pull back, or we have to feel like we have to get very aggressive. And we oftentimes aren't aware that we've lost access to the more resourceful part of our brain. And I wanted to start there by talking about a little bit of the neurology so that we can begin to notice our state and notice when we've gotten activated. In Bridge, we use the term going in the box. In Insight, we talk about a limiting character. They're kind of two of the same things. But when we go there, we're not very resourceful. We're not very effective in our thinking. And we don't relate to the people around us very well either. Our relationships also get hurt in that space as well. The other thing that my wife also reminded me is when we go to that place when we're in fear and anxiety and worry, our immune systems are also potentially compromised. And so it also doesn't serve us from a health perspective. So it becomes really important to notice our state. And the way, this is where we talk about insight really being tuned into awareness, is we have to be aware of noticing our state, because the first thing that will let me know if my amygdala has taken over or if I've gone in the box or into my limiting character is how I'm feeling in my body. It's the feeling level of noticing how I'm feeling. The reason why we talk about noticing our feeling is because our thoughts move so quickly. Literally, our thoughts move at a 1/12 of a second. They go so quick, it's very hard for us to actually process our thoughts. But if we notice how we're feeling in our body, that lets us know whether we're more in that amygdala space or in the box or limiting character, or if we're more in a more expansive space, what we call in Insight the expanded character, in Bridge out of the box, where we have more access to our neocortex, where we're more aware and more resourceful in terms of our choices. And so the first thing we want to look at is noticing, where is my state right now, and begin to notice when we get knocked off, and then obviously how we get back on again. And as we go through the call today, I can speak a little bit more about ways of noticing and recognizing and have more awareness when we're not at our best, kind of in the box or limiting character. And what are some of the ways what are some of the things we can do when that happens to help us move back out again so we can be more aware and more resourceful. So let me pause and see if there's either you have another question or if any of the viewers have anything they'd like to ask me.
So, okay, the viewers will ask about also the website, but you can give them after the exact website. You can write for them after on the chat, but just I want to specify this. Also, one thing I wanted to add is also what I've learned is that the amygdala also is storing all of the negative information, negative experience that we have. And when we're watching the news, it's kind of like overloading also this amygdala. Like we used to not be so much influenced. Like, for example, my grandmother living in a village, there was not so much flooding of information. So now it's really like overloading of this amygdala. And what I wanted to ask you also is, what kind of feelings can I notice when I'm coming in my limiting character? What kind of feelings should I feel?
Well, there's at least two parts to what you just shared, Clementine. So let me talk about two of them if I can. Let me start with, yes, we live in a world where there's a lot more stimulation coming in, right? There's news bombarding us. Now, I have to tell you that I watch very little news.
Yeah, me too.
I actually, by choice, I watch very little news. And I won't go into all the reasons for that, but I watch very closely my state, trying to work to hold the most positive, resourceful state I can. So I want to be very thoughtful about the different sources of information that I'm looking out to. and I actually don't think that news is always news, right? We get a filter of what's out there. And news, we know that news sells based on fear. That people come back, they tend to buy more out of being frightened more than anything else. So that's not to say I'm negative about news, but I'm just very thoughtful about that. I think what I want to say though is what happens when that external thing comes in and we get triggered, we call it a trigger, and we go into the amygdala, is we go into stories that we're already holding inside of us. It's not like things aren't already there. They activate the fearful stories that are already in us, that we already have kind of inside of us. And what's quite interesting is that voice, there's like almost, we call it kind of a voice, or those stories that we begin to make up in our head. Like they tend to have two big parts, two big voices. One we call the judge, and the judge tends to come out more out of the past. There's some aspect of either judging ourselves, being critical of ourselves, being critical of somebody else, being critical of the world, being critical of the politicians. And so we tend to judge. And those come out of our past beliefs about what we think is right, what we think is wrong, how things should be, how things shouldn't be. We call that the voice of the judge. The other negative voice that comes out when the amygdala takes over or when we're in our limiting character is called the pessimist. That's the part of us that looks into the future and only sees the downside. And right now, there's a lot of pessimists being activated, right? Oh my God, what's going to happen from this virus? Who's going to get sick? Who's going to die? What's going to happen to the economy? Am I going to have a job? How am I going to make money? Am I going to have food on the table? These all are legitimate questions. I'm not saying that any of these questions are not legitimate. And some of those are very valid. But when we get caught in this pessimist that only sees downside, it only can see the dark side, then we know we're not being very resourceful. But these stories don't come in from outside of us. These are activating stories that are inside of us already. And so I think the important thing is to kind of recognize, because one of the things, I don't know if you viewers can quite grasp this, when I have more time to work in a workshop, like if I'm in an insight seminar, or if I'm working in one of my bridge programs, one of the things that I will do is work with people in a way to help them to recognize something very important, which is what's happening outside of you does not have to determine the inner space that you hold. Now, that's not easy right now, but your kind of attitude or the context you hold or the way that you think of life or you think of your life, that actually is your choice. That's the dominion that you have power over. I don't say that that's easy, because with all the things that are happening right now, it's so easy to be triggered. It's so easy to go into this negativity. And I'm very compassionate about that. We're all human beings. We're doing the best we can. We have people we care about. Some of us even are at risk at losing some people we care about. So I don't want to minimize any of that. All that I'm speaking to here, though, is that in the midst of this very challenging situation, that how can I be as resourceful as possible? And if I recognize that the state that I'm in or the context that I'm holding is a chance for me to stay resourceful, then I can begin to recognize that I have some choice in that place. One of the things you mentioned about responsibility earlier, Clementine, with insight, is we talk about three main processes. One is awareness. You mentioned awareness. First, I have to be aware of my state. Like, what is my state right now? I have to be aware. Without awareness, there's not a whole lot I can do, right? Because now something else is running me. Those feelings, those thoughts, the outer world, my fear, I have to have awareness. Then once I have awareness, I have choice. Once I have some awareness, I begin to realize I have a choice. And the first choice we say people have is a choice about what's the attitude or what's the state or what's the context I want to hold here. I've been noticing how that can shift around for me quite a lot in terms of, is this a time where I retreat back and I just keep my family safe? There's some of that context. But there's also a context for me I'll share, which is like, there's great need in the world right now. How can I be of service to others? There's people that are worse off than I am. What can I do to help them? You know, part of my being in conversation with you right now and sharing this message is to put something out to try to help people in the way I know how to do that. And it's interesting, when I think of trying to help others, it's one of the ways that helps me from moving from my limiting character back to my expanded character, or back from being less resourceful to more resourceful. It's like I begin to think of how can I help others as one of the ways that I think of one of my choices. And then you mentioned the kind of third one is the responsibility. We have awareness, we have choice, and then I have a responsibility to act on that. So what can I then do? So if I can come from a different context or a lens that's more positive, you know, let me just speak to a couple of other things, and then I'll kind of open it up to our viewers. In our Insight seminar, we have a couple of core ground rules that we work off of. And Clementine, you're familiar with these. One is use everything for our learning, upliftment, and growth. Use everything for our learning, upliftment, and growth. And so if I use that as a lens, I say, this isn't the world that I expected. I'm not sure this is the world that I wanted. You know, this is impacting myself and the people around me. But if I were to use this to learn, uplift, and grow, what can I learn from this? How can I serve here? How can I grow? How can I uplift the people around me? What can I do? What's this calling forth in terms of the best part of me? And we have another guideline that says, take care of yourself so you can help take care of others. And so I ask myself, what can I do to take care of me? Not from a selfish standpoint, but if I don't take care of my own health right now, if I don't watch out for myself, if I don't do what I need to do, both physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually to stay strong, I can't help others. And again, I have people in my home, including my wife, that need to stay healthy. It's critical. So I'm not just doing this for me. I'm also doing it for the people around me. So let me just, again, I take a pause and see if there's anything else you'd like to ask, or if any of our viewers have any questions they'd like me to answer.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, like, when you were saying about the judge, is it the judge that actually creating all of this conspiracy that we're listening? And also, I wanted to ask you what kind of tips you can share, practical tips, how we can raise this awareness and be more in control of our lives during this time.
They're great questions. So you know, the conspiracy theories, this is the way I look at this, right? There's probably a dozen different lenses we could think about the virus from, right? We could think of it totally from a biological medical perspective, which is like, it's a disease. It got started. It's affecting a lot of people, right? We could look at it from a biological warfare. Ooh, it was somebody's idea who created it, and they intentionally want to do this. We could look at it from an global economical standpoint. Oh, what's the impact it's having, and what does that mean? And did somebody make that? And are we making the right choices? You know, there's a lot of people who are saying, oh, you know, how we're responding to this is actually worse than the virus. A lot of people say, you know, if we weren't closing down all these businesses, this is worse than what the virus. So there's that story out there. There's also the story of like the universe rebalancing itself, something happening here that's bigger. You could call it spiritual, or you call it universal or global. Something's happening, that something is rebalancing, and we're going through some kind of a breakdown so we can have a new rebirth. All of those are different lenses. I would say, I don't know. I don't know how it started. I don't know what the best choices are around it. I don't think anybody really does know. And one of the things that I'm trying to do, Clementine, is practice that old motto of one day at a time. I'm really waking up in the morning, and in the morning, I use a series of the tools that I learned from Insight to kind of center myself, to clean up my energy, to start anew, to reconnect to my purpose. And then I say, okay, today, what can I do? How can I serve? What can I do? How can I approach this? How can I be positive? And usually by the end of the day, I'm kind of worn out again. And I can get a little bit into that limiting character. So it's like, okay, let's get to bed. Let's use some techniques to sleep. And I get up the next day. So there's a real kind of practice of a one day at a time. And that's one of the tools. You ask about kind of tips and tools. It's like, one is like, what do I do now? What can I control? Because we can feel so out of control right now. There's so much, even the doctors and the leaders, they don't know. They don't know what's going to happen. They don't know what's going to go on. They're trying to, you know, but what do I know? And this is what I want to come back to in terms of the work that we do both at Insight and at Bridge, is we do help people to connect to their core values, that core sense of their purpose. In Insight, we talk about the purpose of your heart. And when I can connect back into that part inside of me and say, what values do I want to live with? No matter what's happening in the world, who do I want to be today? Do I want to be kind? Do I want to be compassionate? Do I want to be resourceful? Do I want to be courageous? You know, do I want to make good choices? Do I want to do the right thing? You know, so and so I connect to kind of the core of, I think, me at my best. And I feel like when I can connect back into that, and if those of you that are listening, if you don't have a heart's purpose statement or a purpose statement, just take some time to reflect on your core values. You know, I want to be honest today. I want to be a person of integrity. I want to be forgiving. I want to be kind. I want to be loving. I want to be caring. I think all people, you know, have a place that has this place inside that's like, yeah, that's who I want to show up as in my life, whether there's a virus or not. But this is a great time to reflect and say, there's a whole lot I don't know. There's a lot of stuff I'm afraid of, but and I don't know what's going to happen. And, you know, but how do I want to show up? You know, and that's one of my biggest tips. I think the other thing that I try to remind myself of is what I'm grateful for. You know, it's sometimes easy to, in this time right now, Clementine, to think about all that we're losing or could lose. You know, could I lose my job? Could I lose people in my family? You know, could life be lost? You know, could the economy tank? You know, so there's so much focus on loss right now, and I can acutely feel some of that pain. I mean, I can really identify with the pain associated with the loss, and I'm not saying that those aren't real, right? At the same time, we're talking about an antidote here, right? An antidote to that is say, what do I have in my life? I actually woke up this morning healthy. That's a great blessing. A lot of people are not, right? I woke up today and I'm fortunate enough to have my family with me here. And I woke up today and I have enough resource that I could also maybe serve some other people that don't have as much resource. I think the other, we also have, let me share one other thing that people might find helpful that we use in Bridge. That's a process for helping us move back into a more resourceful state. And that we call that ETC. And it's the same thing as like etc., but it's ETC. And the E stands for emotion. And if you remember, I said the first level of awareness to know if you're at your best or not at your best is, how am I feeling in my body? What's the feeling? That lets me know. That's the awareness piece. Oh, how am I feeling? That's the emotion. After the E, we say, take a deep breath. So you want one tip, if you forget everything else from this call, remember to pause and take a deep breath, a conscious deep breath. Because what happens when we get in these judge and the pessimist places in our heads that get exaggerated and big, and the world's coming to an end and everyone's going to die and I'm going to end up with no food. And, you know, we're not actually present. We've actually moved out of the present. We're either coming out of the past or we've gone into a negative future. What we want to do, and the way we get back to our neocortex, is we've got to come present again. We've got to get back to here and now. And when you take a deep breath, a conscious deep breath, ideally 3 or 4 is good, just coming present, you can't take a conscious deep breath and not come more present. And when you come more present, one of the most important things is you begin to get more perspective. You connect back into the physical reality that you're in right now. Because right now I'm sitting in a room in my home in Boston. So I live in the Boston area. I'm sitting in a room in my home, but if I get lost in my thoughts, there's a part of me that's acting like I'm being chased by a lion. If I can come more present right here and now, I realize I'm not physically at risk right now. I'm actually safe. And that's really important. So deep breath. We go from E to C, from E, the emotion, to T, ETC. T asks the question, what's really true here? What's really true? So T stands for truth. and to really evaluate and look at what's really true here. What unequivocally is true about the story I'm saying in my head. And some of that truth might be valid fear. That might be, I have a right to be fearful. I shouldn't be going out and hugging and kissing people right now. That doesn't make sense, right? I should be keeping space. That's a level of truth that is positive. But it also is a truth that helps us ground back into this present moment. I'm sitting on a chair in this room, in my home, so I'm not physically at risk right now. So I don't have to respond. My body doesn't have to respond emotionally like I'm at risk. After the tea, we take another deep breath. And if you're on the call right now, if you're listening, I'm going to invite you to do this if you haven't done it, just with me. Go ahead and just take a deep breath in. And let it go. Take another deep breath in and hold it at the top just for a moment. And then release. Now, if you were like me, just doing that, I noticed that my state shifted. I noticed that I was speaking to you at a very fast, maybe pace, and my energy slowed down, and I feel more relaxed now. And I'm just going to suggest that that's available to any one of us anytime. And if I continue with the ETC, the C is choice. Before we talked about, in the insight model, awareness, choice, responsibility. In the bridge model, it's emotion, i.e. awareness. Where is my state? What's really true here? How do I get back in my body and back into my neocortex, the smarter part of my head? And now what choices can I make, given that I have more awareness in that space? Okay, Clementine, I've done a lot of talking, so I'm going to turn it back over to you and see if you or any of our viewers have any other questions.
Yeah, I've got Stavriana. So she say, lovely to see you and hear you again, Mike. So Stavriana was in the last insight with you. And she say, please, would you elaborate how you reconnect with your purpose on a daily basis? And what I mean is, please share with us your daily ritual if you have one. So you just share one of them, but maybe you like to say more about it.
Well, thank you for the question. Wonderful to see you. I know I can't actually see you, but thank you for coming on to the call. And it's a wonderful question. And first thing is, before I talk about my practice, I think it's really valuable for every one of us to have some kind of a practice. It doesn't have to be an insight practice. There's all kinds of good practices, whether they're meditation, whether there's some kind of prayer, there's some kind of affirmation or visualization. You might be the kind of person who's more physical, so you want to get up and run in the morning or exercise or do yoga, all kinds of different kinds of meditation. I think that the important thing is find one that works for you. But I think it's extraordinarily important that sometime, particularly if we can do it early in the day, I like to do it right when I wake up, because I know that once I get started with my day, and I'm probably like a lot of you, I'm a pretty busy guy, right? I've got 2 kids, I've got a wife, I have a job that, up until 3 weeks ago, I was spending half my time on the road traveling all over the world. In fact, this really hit home for me when I was about to get on a flight to London. And 2 days before, they said, we just, stopped all international travel with a client I was working on. But coming back to a daily practice, I find it extremely, in fact, I wouldn't know how to live effectively if I didn't have my practice in the morning. So I will share a little bit about mine, but I would say go out and find something that works for you and start small. So I've done mine for some version of mine for over 20 years. And so it's been built in deeply. And one of the things about that is that not only does it help me to center and kind of get back into my heart and into the best part of me, but it also is designed for me to program my unconscious so that I can bring a positive context to life, that I can think of life. It's interesting that we're in this time with this virus. And one of the things that I visualized for years is a visualization that I'm safe and I'm healthy, that I'm safe and healthy. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But so it's not just something I'm saying in my head, but if I do it over and over every day, it actually works its way into my unconscious. And so I unconsciously make choices that are smart choices around being safe and healthy. That doesn't mean I'm afraid. I travel all over the world. I go all in the kind of places. I'm facing into my fears, working with top clients all the time. All my self-talk about how I'm not good enough, and the practice helps us on a daily basis to recenter and be at our best. But done over time, it also can reprogram our unconscious so that we unconsciously begin to live some of the things that we want to more in our life. So find the one that works for you. A couple of high levels for me. Without giving away too much about what we do in Insight, we have a really beautiful process called the sanctuary process in the first Insight seminar we do. And I actually use that, some aspects of that every day to help me to do some of what I was just sharing, which is what qualities do I want to bring forward? What are some of those core values I want to live today? How do I reconnect to those, not just mentally, but really in my body? When I do my practice, I try to get it from just a thinking level, and I want to kind of bring it in so I can feel it. I can actually feel. So if I'm going to be honest today, really honest with myself and others, what does that feel like? What does it mean to live honesty, not just think honesty? You know, if I want to be compassionate, what does it mean to really be compassionate today? What does it mean to be a compassionate person? And I'll use some different tools from the sanctuary, and I'll use what we call affirmations. A lot of you are familiar with affirmations. I use affirmations to affirm the positive qualities I want to have, always said in the present moment. You know, I am courageous. I am caring. I am compassionate, whatever that might be. I affirm those. And again, I affirm them as also a way of rewiring and kind of getting inside of myself, so I begin to unconsciously be compassionate, be caring, be courageous, be forgiving, be strong, whatever those might be, the qualities that matter for you. I use visualization. I do a lot of visualizing. And we have one thing I'll get into a little bit, and maybe we'll come back maybe I'll do something with Clementine in the future when I'll even take you through some of this. I wouldn't mind doing something if you're interested at some point in time, and actually going a bit through my journey that has my inner work has been designed over a number of years with a number of components. One of those is I actually stand in a column of light. I imagine light coming in from high above. And I imagine that light has a beautiful quality to it. Some of you can think of it as a very natural quality, like the light of the sun that just brings life with it. Some of you might want to think of it as a spiritual quality, but I imagine that light filling every cell of me physically, but also filling me mentally, emotionally, spiritually, my imagination, unconscious, subconscious, filling every part of me. And then I imagine those qualities that I'm speaking about filling every part of me. What I've come to learn is that wisdom doesn't always come from up here. It comes from all of us. It comes from all aspects of me. You know, there might be something that's actually in my body. I don't know how many of you are like me. I get some of my best thinking when I'm exercising. You know, right now the gyms are all closed here. So I exercise by running up and down the steps at the railway station. We're lucky enough that we can still go outside here. And in some cases, you can't even go outside. But the railroad station nearby has some steps. So I run up and down the steps. And that's how. And when I'm doing that, I have my best thinking. So it connects us back that there's wisdom, there's memory, there's experience in every cell in our body. And that's why I like to visualize that light coming through all the cells in my body. I also have a process of thinking of the people in my life that I send that out to with an intention. I'm a big believer, and this is a big focus of the work of Insight, that at the level of our heart, at the level of, I don't know if you want to call it soul, we're all interconnected. So we're all going through this together. So there's some part of me that's connected to everybody else on this planet, and everything and every plant and animal and human on this planet. And I believe that when I can go into the loving in that space, and I send that love or that light or that healing or that forgiveness or whatever it might, when I send that out, it has an impact. And so I have a list of people that are in kind of in my light circle that I send that out to as well. So that maybe that's enough. And then I also have a little bit of meditation I do in there, a little bit of quiet, a little bit of chanting. Some of you might also be in a chanting. There's some tones. There's one of my colleagues at Bridge is really into music, and I'm just beginning to appreciate. Some of you have a lot more experience than I do in this space. The beauty of tone and music and sound and vibration, and certain vibrations bring forward certain kinds of healing to different parts of the body. We use music in the Insight seminars as well to do that. And one of the things he was sharing, I'll just share one last thing. He was talking about how most of us, when we listen to music, we want to kind of hear a common rhythm or something that kind of makes sense and holds together. And he was saying how jazz musicians, they'll get together and they'll do a jam session and they'll kind of be playing, and then somebody else will do something discordant or different. And most of us would say, oh, no, that's not right. That didn't sound right. I didn't expect that. That doesn't sound like it's the rhythm. The jazz musicians would say, ooh, how cool. I didn't see that coming. I wasn't expecting that. And so they adapt quickly to this new sound and kind of move with it. And I was thinking, how perfect is that for where we are right now? Well, I didn't see this coming. We didn't see this freaking virus coming. It's like, but how do I, instead of judging it, it's like, ooh, I didn't expect that, but how do I dance with it? How do I move with it? How do I cooperate with it? One of the things we talk about in Insight is, how do we accept life as it shows up, and how do we cooperate with life? Instead of judging life, it's like, this is how it's showing up right now. Okay, I can judge it. That's not going to help. That's going to just put me back in that amygdala and all that stuff. Or I can say, all right, this is how it is, one day at a time. Here's what's so right now. How do I cooperate? How do I accept? How do I cooperate? And then how can I be at my best today? So, okay, again, I think I went off on a tangent there, Clementine. I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Mike. So Lucy Markowska, she asked, I want to ask you, what is your feeling about the change that is happening now? How do you imagine the world will be in 3 months?
Well, it's Lucy, thank you for the question. Let me say one thing that just came to mind for me. In our work with Bridge right now, we did a lot of face-to-face work, and so we're changing what we're doing so we can do it virtually. We've already done some stuff virtually. We've done some teamwork and coaching virtually, but we're kind of shifting. And one of the things we talked about, I'm coming back to your question, Lucy, is there's kind of two kind of places that people are right now, and they're moving back and forth between them, particularly if they're in work environments, but also in home environments. One is what we call the acute phase, which is like, it's immediate. I'm afraid. How do I stay safe? How do I keep my family safe? What do I have to make decisions about in terms of my business? So it's acute. It's right here, right now. How do I handle it right here? And it feels very close to us in terms of our physical health, our financial health, our emotional and spiritual health. Then there's what's called the adaptive phase. It's like, if I can feel like I got at least this somewhat handled, then I begin to say, how do I adapt to this new reality? All right. I was just commenting recently that we've now gotten into this enough that I'm almost forgetting what life was like before this. That's kind of a sad thing a little bit, but how do we adapt to this new reality? And if I go with what you were saying, Lucy, and what's the future going to hold now? What's this going to mean? You asked 3 months. I don't know, 3 months. None of us knows how long this is going to hold and how long and at what level it's going to hold. My friends in Cyprus, Clementine and Krasimir, they're in a situation where they can't go out at all unless they have permission. We can go out, but all non-essential businesses are closed down, and you're not supposed to do any congregating. So how long is it going to stay like that? I have no idea. I mean, my hope is not too long, but I don't know. So I have curiosity about where we're going to be in 3 months. I also have curiosity where we're going to be in a year from now, or what are things look like during this journey? I don't know. There's going to be phases, and I'm just going to have to be as adaptable as I can as I go. And then I have this also curiosity about, particularly if I bring in the lens that I like to hold, which is there's some great rebalancing going on right here. There's something on a global nature that's rebalancing. And then I say, okay, if we're going to get a kind of a white space to recreate the world we want, what would that look like? Because if you want to bring in a more optimistic or sense of possibility side to this, if you were wanting to see a different world than the world that was, boy, this is a time to kind of go all in. If you were really wanting to see some big changes in terms of how we are as a planet, if you wanted to see us more compassionate, if you wanted to see us more connected, I'm going to speak from some of my values here. I'm not saying that you're yours, but you know, if you wanted to see us more understanding, if you wanted to see us more just, if you wanted to see more love in the world and more peace in the world, you know, this is a time of enormous change. Like, this is a time to be, instead of backing away in fear, it's like, this is a time to be in. Because, man, this is, you know, this is our chance, or an opportunity, if we're coming from our heart's purpose and a vision we want to see for the planet, to actually be asking ourselves, how can I use this as an opportunity to create a world in the future that I really want to see more of? So I know that, again, I'll move between that acute and adaptive space. And as you mentioned, Lucy, there's kind of a month or 2 or 3 out adaptive, which to me will still be in this to some degree. I don't know how severely we'll still be in this in 3 months. I don't know how far out we'll be off the back end, and I don't know what off the back end looks like. I probably will keep holding a vision that's a positive one of which I even before the virus, another piece of my work has been to hold an image of the entire planet surrounded in light and love and peace. You know, that's a big vision, right? I mean, that's a big goal to hold, but it's the one I hold. And so, and then, you know, one day at a time. Like, I think I'm going to keep taking this as much as one day of it kind of as I can, and I can envision a more positive future when I get more in my expanded character, when I get more out of the box, and I recognize my state, like we talked about earlier. Thank you for your question. I hope I answered it okay. Clementine?
Julie, please.
Yes, I have another question from Rositza. So, do you think the consciousness of the humanity will rise after this? Do you think the world will need insight after?
Thank you, Rositza. I will tell you what I actually believe. This is my counter belief. So, but my point of view is we've hit a point where there's no going. We're either going to go one way or the other, right? And I think we're hitting the point where I think we're being communicated to on a certain level. It says either you raise your consciousness, or a bit of a game over. That's kind of dramatic. Maybe I don't need to be that dramatic, but I will say, Rossi, that you know, I'm a huge believer that, and this is not only insight, but it's also the core of our work with Bridge. Even we're working with corporate clients. It starts with being conscious. It starts with being aware. If I'm not conscious, if I'm not aware, then everything else is kind of academic. And I think what this will do is rattle some people. You know, you know as well as I do that our first seminar is called the Awakening Heart Seminar. And the intent of that Insight One Awakening Heart is to awaken people. I know it did when I took it years ago. It awoken me to something I wasn't aware of. I wasn't aware of really who I was and my potential. I wasn't aware of, you know, kind of a perspective that was broader than my little small kind of box that I was in. And that consciousness and that awareness, I think, in my point of view, the core work of Insight should be the first work that everybody in life actually has. To me, because it is the foundation off which everything else is built. So I would love to have people recognize the value of the work of Insight and other consciousness work. I mean, you know, obviously we're lovers of the Insight work because it's had such a huge impact on us. And I will say that there's many people doing great work out there that brings awareness and awakens and brings consciousness. And I think that is a responsibility of every one of us. So thank you for your question.
And after I have Imbal, who is saying how to share the situation and tools with children.
Oh, thank you, Imbal. It's a great question. Here's what children. So it's interesting because where I went was we can have children anything from age 6 months to age 20, right? So it depends on where in the spectrum of children that we're speaking to. So I would speak differently with my 20-year-old and 18-year-old than I might with a 3 or 4-year-old. I'll say this, since some of you know that one of the, it was mentioned that I've either authored or co-authored, 5 books. One of my books is called Insights of a Father. And it's reflections from when my 2 children were young, because I took some time off and really spent some time parenting. And it's really like what I learned from them, not what I learned about life from my kids more than anything else. And kids up until probably the age of 8 or 9, or even older than that, they get who we're being much more than what we're saying. And so, I think our ability to show up in this space, if we show up fearful, they're going to be fearful. If we show up anxious, they're going to get anxious. If we show up courageous, they're going to learn to be courageous. If we show up in service of others, thinking more about how can I help the people in need, they're going to learn service. If I show up and model to them that, I'm afraid, but I'm open and honest about it, and then I demonstrate to them how I can become more resourceful, they're going to learn how to deal with their own fear and anxiety and how they can learn to be more resourceful and more effective. So I'm actually a big believer that we don't need to think as much about. Now, if we get into the ages of late teens or my kids, then we can have discussions, but they're based on the same thing I'd basically be saying to you right now. So I have a belief about the young generation. I mean, I think we should get out of the frickin' way. Like the young generation, they've come in my opinion, wired to go into the future way farther than I'm going to go. And they inherently know what's needed to go to that future. We're getting in the way of that. And I don't mean to be ageistic. I don't mean to say just if you're older in age that you're stopping things. But I do think what's happening, if I go back to Rossi's question about what's happening on kind of universal level, I think there's an old belief system, hierarchical kind of belief system that's now being challenged to be broken down. And I think that there is a new consciousness that's wanting to emerge. And if anything, I would almost invite us to listen to the young people in terms of where they're coming from. Let them be our teachers. Let innocence instead of experience be the guide. I have a point of view that experience is valuable, but innocence allows a sense of possibility that experience doesn't allow. So, Imbal, I'm not sure if I answered your question, but I would come back to they're innately picking up who we're being. And so our ability to manage our state and act from a place of integrity or from our heart's purpose is the best thing we can do with people of all ages.
Thank you. And then I have Ina Yordanova, who is saying, is Insight thinking of any form of online education?
Great question. The answer is absolutely yes. In fact, it's interesting. Just in the last couple of weeks, our global team has connected in Insight. And we're in the process right now of actually collecting the best. We have an extremely experienced and wise and heart-centered set of a facilitation team with Insight, as well as a community. And those people have enormous resources. We have resources that we've developed in Insight over many years, and we have a number of our facilitators and other members of our community who have developed a number of resources. And much like we're doing in Bridge, where we're looking to bring our stuff online and make it available to corporations and organizations, Insight is also doing this in terms of making that available initially to those people who, I don't know, initially, I'm not even sure. I'm assuming they're going to make it some available to people who have actually taken the Insight seminars, because there's some of that language that's easier understood once you've gone through a seminar. But I know they're also planning to make things more widely available to the public. which I think will be extremely helpful, particularly in this time when it's very hard to get together physically. So thank you for the question.
Well, let me ask you a question also. There is some people saying now everything's happened for a reason. So what could possibly be the reason for something like this?
Well, it's interesting that you asked that, Clementine, because it's a little bit of what we've already been talking about, right? And I will say that my 20-year-old probably learned it from my wife and I, but my 20-year-old is the one who reminds me that everything happens for a reason. And I like it as a lens or a context. The thing we have the power always. Here's the thing that's quite, there's something that we talk about in Insight called the reticular activating system. And many of you may recall it, some of you who have not done Insight. All it is it's a filter. And a lot of you know this by different terms. The reticular activating system is a filter that's filtering in and filtering out stimulation, information, everything that's coming in, filtering in some things and filtering out other things. The reason why we talk about it in Insight is, one, it's obvious. You couldn't walk down a street, well, not now, but back when there was a lot of people on the street, you couldn't walk down a busy street and not filter things out without going crazy. I mean, if every horn that beeped and every sound was coming in, you'd go nuts. So you need to filter out and be filtering in. The thing that matters about it, though, in terms of what we talk about in Insight, is that our belief systems, our core beliefs, seem to sit in that filter. And so we're actually unconsciously filtering in things to confirm our beliefs correct and filtering out things that are counter to our beliefs, which makes it particularly hard for us to change beliefs. When we have a core belief about something, we will fight hard to keep it. And one of the ways we do that is we filter in information that supports that belief and filter out information that doesn't support it. So if we're doing that, it becomes really important for that lens to be a set of beliefs that are going to empower me or are going to support me or are going to help me to be at my best. That's one of the reasons why I do that, those visualizations and affirmations, and I talk about the unconscious, is to rewire my belief system so that I'm holding belief systems that serve me. And that core question is one of the questions that I want to be living from, because that's how I want to approach life. If no matter what shows up in life, if there's a meaning to it, then I can answer that in a way that that brings out the best in me. And it comes back to our first guideline of the Insight seminar: use everything for your learning, upliftment, and growth. That's the same thing. It's like, whatever shows up, how is this for me? How can I use it? What's the meaning for it? And to me, it's just a wonderful context to live from.
Thank you. So as we are closing now, we will be closing the meeting. I want to ask again if anybody has a question. And I'd like to ask you also, what could you say now as closing words to our listeners?
Well, a couple of things. One, people had asked for those websites. So let me just kind of really quickly, I think you might have put them up, but you have insightseminars.org. So insightseminars.org, that's the global website. You also have, and I think you're going to speak about it in a moment, Clementine, is certainly get in touch with Clementine and Krasimir about their newsletter. That'd be a great resource. In terms of Bridge, those of you that are working with companies or corporations, we tend to work with large ones, but if you have an interest, please reach out. We be happy to help you. That's bridge-partnership.com. bridge-partnership.com. And we also have our not-for-profit arm that we're directly looking at bringing the best of what we do to Bridge to address the COVID-19 situation. We also work with a number of global issues in terms of abuse and violence towards women and children. I was over in India last year working on that. We've worked in some areas that have violence to bring peace. That's called bridge-institute.org. bridge-institute.org. In terms of closing thoughts, all I will share is practice in the area of watching your state. You know, take care of yourself so you can help take care of others. Or in the bridge language, we have what we call me, us, and it. First, you need to take care of the me. You need to make sure that you are in your best state, accessing your neocortex, accessing your core values and your heart's purpose before you can take care of others and help others. And I would say just notice one of the things that I'll kind of end with is, yes, you want to take care of yourself and the people close to you. And there's something quite powerful about asking, how can I serve here? You know, how can I contribute to the others around me? And almost always when I do that, it lifts me. And it helps me to get a broader perspective. I think finally, I'll say thank you to Clementine and Krasimir for the invitation to be on the call. And I want to say thank you for all of you who joined the call or might have a chance to watch the call. And who knows, you know, as the world turns, maybe we'll have a chance to connect face-to-face or virtually at some point in the future. Thank you again. Thank
you, Mike. Thank you for everyone. I have also a last question. Mike Connor once posed me the question, what if everything really is here for me? Core question for my life. Thank you.
It's very good. Good one to live for.
So I want to thank you all our listeners, and I want also to remind you that you can also subscribe to the newsletter if you want to know more about the upcoming events that are coming now. We're going to have online workshop. We're going to have also coaching session. And also I want to tell you that we're going to have on the 29th and the 31st of May, an Insight One in Cyprus, in Paphos. And then we have also an Insight One in Sofia, Bulgaria, the 5 to 8 of June. So, and also tomorrow we're having the coaching session with Dr. Barbara Schwartz. So yeah, if you like to join, you're welcome. We'll get a lot of valuable content like we did tonight. Sorry, I have my daughter just coming because we're also in quarantine here. So thank you all for joining us tonight. Thank you. Have a lovely evening. Stay safe. Thank you, Mike. Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Bye.